Joining me now is SportsMoney Reporter Matt Craig. Matt, thanks for coming on.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Brittany.
Let's get straight to the point here. Forbes has just identified the fourth ever billionaire athlete. Who is it?
It's Magic Johnson, Earvin Magic Johnson. In the business world, he goes by Earvin. But I think it's interesting, different from the others, who I'll just name. I think it's a fun trivia question to ask people, but the other three are Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and LeBron James. The interesting thing is all three of those, their wealth is anchored by massive earnings, either on the court with playing contracts and also endorsements. In the case of Tiger Woods, like hundreds of millions or $100 million a year in endorsements. Magic Johnson played in an era before big money in sports. He made about $40 million total playing basketball. He was making $2 to $4 million in endorsements a year. So he had a lot further to climb to become a billionaire, and now he's done it.
Let's talk a bit about that journey, that climbing journey, because he has that staying power of the likes of Tiger Woods, LeBron James. How is he able to do that? Walk us through.
I think the secret to Magic's, really his entire life, but especially his business career, is just that charisma. You know, he has the smile. He has an ability to make instant connections with people that are not just like feeling like they're friends, but lasting relationships over decades. And so he was able to build his wealth through joint venture partnerships and other arrangements where he could have a relationship with someone who was richer than him, who would agree to put forth money that he did not have. And then he over-delivered his element of that partnership. He was a great teammate and then was able to scale up those businesses, enter an industry, do extremely well, exit, make some money, get into a bigger business over and over again until eventually now he owns 60% of a life insurance company, which I think a lot of people wouldn't necessarily associate a former athlete with life insurance, but he owns a life insurance company that's worth well over $1 billion.
So you're saying he has $1 billion smile. That's the secret to his success.
Absolutely.
But he was a point guard in the 80s and early 90s. And I want you to talk about how he decided, hey, I want to foray into the business world. What was his first venture?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. Nowadays, athletes, they all want to do business. They all want to be entrepreneurs. But in the 80s, that was a very foreign concept. Other than athletes smiling in some commercials, athletes were not involved in business at all. Athletes, in fact, were known for blowing their money, spending all their money. Magic Johnson, coming up his entire life, he wanted to get involved in business. He wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so as the story goes, we think it's true, but who knows at this point, it's legend. During a game in the 80s at the Forum, this was back in, of course, the Showtime Laker era, so there were lots of important, powerful people that would come to the Forum to watch the Lakers play. Supposedly, like during an inbounds pass during a game, he turns to Joe Smith, who was a record executive, and says, "How do I get into business?" I think as he says it, he says, this may not be the best time, but how do I get into business? Eventually, he makes friends with him. He makes friends with another guy named Peter Guber, who's also, at the time, he was the chairman of Sony Pictures, so it was in the movie business. And those guys became mentors for him. They also introduced him to Michael Ovitz, who is probably the most powerful agent of all time. He co-founded CAA, and really the three of them became like a masterclass in business for him over the next several years.
You've reported, and you said earlier in this conversation, that one of his reasons for success, both on the court and off the court, is that he's a really good teammate. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, well, ultimately, business is about getting in a room and making deals. Mm-hmm. And over again, the people that I talked to would say that, you would get into a room with 10 people and Magic would come in and just flash that $1 billion smile that you're talking about. And it changed the dynamic from, hey, I don't know how we can get this deal to work, to I really want to find a way to make this deal work. And oftentimes that makes the biggest difference in a deal. Like, it can go either way. You can talk yourself into it or out of it. And when Magic Johnson was involved, time and time again, people found a way to talk themselves into a deal. And I think the best example of that is, and I love this story, Michael Ovitz says, hey, I don't want to take on represent athletes. Magic wins him over, and Michael Ovitz sets him up with Pepsi and Coke. At the time in 1990,
rival of the century.
Yeah, exactly. Pepsi and Coke, the rival of the century, much like the Lakers and the Celtics of the era. But they wanted an athlete or a minority investor in a Coke bottling plant. in a Pepsi bottling plant. And he gets into a room in this swanky Manhattan club, and all of a sudden he's talked his way into a 33% stake worth $20 million that supposedly he spent less than half of that to get the stake, maybe as little as like 5 or 10 million, just because he's magic, and he was able to get that deal done. And again, time and time again, I mean, I can go through more examples if you want, but he kind of made these deals happen where there never were deals to be made before.